Frank's fist connected with Dean's jaw, and Dean's head snapped back. Everyone backstage froze because on stage the orchestra had already started playing their intro music. Wait, because what they saw on Dean's face in the next 30 seconds shocked even Frank Sinatra, and it turned this night into one of the darkest secret moments in Rat Pack history. The cut on Dean's lip wasn't deep, but it was immediate, a thin red line that appeared the second Frank's knuckles made contact. Dean's head had whipped to the side, and for one beat, maybe two, nobody moved. The stage manager's clipboard clattered to the floor. The makeup woman's hand went to her mouth. The girl Frank had been shouting at, the one Dean had stepped in front of, she made a sound like she was trying to breathe through water. And the orchestra, oblivious behind the curtain, kept playing the opening bars of The Lady is a Tramp, bright and swinging and completely unaware that the two men who were supposed to walk out and sing it were standing 3 feet apart with violence hanging in the air between them. Dean touched his lip. His fingers came away red. He looked at the blood for a moment, then at Frank, and his face did something nobody who was there that night could explain properly afterward. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even surprise. It was colder than that. One woman who worked the wardrobe said later it was like watching someone decide in real time whether to burn a bridge or save it, and you could see the exact second he made his choice. Frank was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling under his tuxedo shirt. His fist was still clenched. Dean straightened slowly, touched his lip again, then did something that made the whole room hold its breath. He smiled. Not a real smile, not one that reached his eyes, but a showman smile, the kind you paint on when the curtain's about to rise and there's no time for anything else. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, dabbed at the cut, and when he spoke his voice was so quiet everyone had to lean in to hear it. "You're going to walk out there with me," Dean said, "and you're going to sing like nothing happened. And when we're done, you're going to shake my hand in front of 1,500 people. And then we're going to talk about this." The orchestra hit the turnaround, the part where the singer comes in. 20 seconds, maybe less. The stage manager looked like he might faint. Frank's jaw was working. His eyes locked on Dean's, and for a moment it could have gone either way. Then Dean stepped past him, straightened his bow tie in the mirror by the door, and walked toward the stage entrance. He didn't look back. He just kept walking, slow and steady. And after 3 steps, Frank followed him. "Look, before we go any further, you need to understand how this started, because the punch didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of 3 hours of pressure building in a backstage area that was already too small, too hot, and full of many people who knew something bad was going to happen but couldn't figure out how to stop it. The night began at 6. The venue was the Stardust, a casino showroom on the Strip that could pack in 1,800 when they really squeezed. Dean and Frank were doing a special performance, one night only, a favor for someone who'd done them a favor years back, the kind of favor you couldn't say no to, even if you wanted to. They'd rehearsed once barely, and everyone knew it. The set list was thrown together from songs they'd sung 100 times, the kind of thing they could do in their sleep. Easy money, easy night. But backstage, before the doors even opened, there was tension. Frank had arrived late, and when he walked in, he had that look on his face, the one everyone who worked with him recognized. Tight around the eyes, jaw set, moving like a boxer looking for a fight. He didn't say hello to anyone, just went straight to his dressing room and slammed the door hard enough that a picture frame fell off the wall in the hallway. Dean arrived 20 minutes later, calm, nodding to the crew, stopping to light a cigarette and ask the sound guy if his mic was going to cut out like it did last time. Normal Dean behavior. Easy. The contrast between the two of them was so obvious that the stage manager pulled Dean aside and asked if Frank was okay. Dean shrugged. "He's Frank," he said. Like that explained everything. Maybe it did. The girl's name was Rita. She was 19, maybe 20, working the backstage hospitality area, bringing drinks and sandwiches to the performers and crew. Dark hair, nervous hands, the kind of quiet that comes from being around people who can hurt you and knowing it. She'd been assigned to the gig 3 days earlier, and nobody thought much of it until Frank saw her. He came out of his dressing room around 7, and when he spotted her near the coffee station, he stopped cold. Just stood there in the hallway, staring, his whole body going rigid. One of the backup singers saw it happen. She said later that Frank's face changed like someone had slapped him, and then he was moving toward Rita fast, his hand already raised, his voice sharp. "What the hell are you doing here?" Rita dropped the tray she was holding. Cups shattered, coffee spread across the linoleum. She stammered something, an apology, an explanation, but Frank wasn't listening. He was already too far into whatever he was feeling, and the words coming out of his mouth were ugly. Names. accusations, things that didn't make sense to anyone else in the hallway but made perfect sense to him and to her because they had history, the kind of history that doesn't fade, that sits in your chest and waits for a chance to explode. Dean heard the shouting from his dressing room. He came out still holding a glass of scotch, his jacket off, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He saw Frank, saw Rita backing against the wall with her hands up like she was trying to shield herself from something invisible, and he didn't hesitate. He walked right between them, put his hand on Frank's chest and said, "That's enough." Frank shoved his hand away. "This doesn't concern you." "It does now," Dean said. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it, the kind of tone you use when you're not asking. "She's working. Leave her alone. Notice something here, because this is the moment everyone backstage started paying attention." Dean Martin didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He just planted himself between Frank Sinatra and a girl most people didn't even know, and he made it clear he wasn't moving. That kind of thing doesn't happen often, not in a world where Frank Sinatra usually gets whatever he wants. And the people watching knew it meant something bigger than just a backstage argument. Frank's face went red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," Dean said. "Go back to your dressing room." For a second, it looked like Frank might swing right then, 3 hours before he actually did. His fist clenched, his shoulder rolled forward. But then someone called out that the doors were opening, that they had 90 minutes, and the moment broke. Frank turned and walked away without another word, and Rita slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor with her face in her hands. Dean helped her up, got someone to bring her water, and sent her home with a $100 bill and a promise that nobody would bother her again. But the damage was done. The countdown had started, 90 minutes until showtime, and everyone backstage knew that Dean and Frank were on a collision course. The next hour was a master class in professional survival. Dean and Frank stayed in their separate dressing rooms. The stage manager shuttled between them, trying to get them to at least stand next to each other for a sound check, but neither one would budge. Frank sent word that his levels were fine from last time. Dean said he didn't need to check anything. He'd figure it out when he got out there. The band ran through the set list without them. The audience started filling the showroom, unaware that the two men they'd paid to see were currently refusing to be in the same room. At 8:30, 30 minutes before curtain, the stage manager tried one more time. He knocked on Dean's door first. Dean opened it, still calm, still smoking. "We're fine," he said. "We'll go on." "Are you sure?" Dean gave him a look. "I'm sure." Then the stage manager went to Frank's door. Frank didn't open it, just shouted through it that he'd be there, that everyone needed to stop worrying, that he was a professional. The stage manager walked away looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 minutes. Remember this, because what happened next only makes sense if you understand how much pressure was riding on the next half hour. The casino had sold out every seat. High rollers from 3 states had flown in, specifically for this show. There were rumors that people from New York were in the audience, people who'd done favors, people who expected favors back. If Dean and Frank didn't walk out on that stage together, smiling and singing, it wasn't just a canceled show. It was a problem that would ripple outward in ways nobody wanted to think about. At 8:50, Dean left his dressing room and walked toward the stage entrance. He passed Frank's door without stopping. At 8:55, Frank came out. He didn't look at anyone, just headed straight for the same stage entrance where Dean was already waiting. They stood 5 feet apart, not speaking, not looking at each other. The stage manager tried to say something encouraging. Neither one acknowledged him. The orchestra played the overture. The audience applauded. The announcer's voice boomed through the curtain. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Stardust is proud to present, for one night only, Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra." The applause was deafening. The curtain started to rise, and that's when Rita appeared in the hallway behind them. She'd come back. Nobody knew why. Maybe she forgot something. Maybe she changed her mind about going home. But she was there, and Frank saw her. He turned, his face going dark again, and he started toward her. Dean saw it happening, and he stepped in Frank's path. Again. One more time. "Don't," Dean said. "Get out of my way." "No." Frank's fist came up fast, no warning, just pure rage translated into motion. It caught Dean on the jaw, a solid hit that would have dropped someone smaller. Dean staggered back one step, touched his lip, and that's when the moment everyone would talk about afterward began. That 30-second window where Dean Martin made a choice that saved the show, saved Frank, and maybe saved himself, even though it cost him something nobody could see. The blood on his handkerchief was bright under the backstage lights. Dean folded it carefully and put it back in his pocket. He looked at Frank, then at Rita, then back at Frank, and he spoke in that same quiet voice, the one that cut through all the noise and anger and fear and forced everyone to listen. You're going to walk out there with me, and you're going to sing like nothing happened, and when we're done, you're going to shake my hand in front of 1,500 people, and then we're going to talk about this. The orchestra was 15 seconds from the vocal entrance. Frank's breathing was ragged. Dean turned and walked toward the stage, his back straight, his stride steady, like he hadn't just taken a punch from one of his closest friends. And Frank, after a heartbeat that felt like an hour, followed him. They walked out into the lights together. The audience erupted. Dean smiled his showman smile, the one he'd painted on Backstage, and it looked real from the seats. Frank smiled too, a little delayed, a little forced, but it was there. They took their positions at their microphones, and when the orchestra hit their cue, they sang. Dean's voice was smooth, effortless, like nothing in the world was wrong. Frank's voice was rougher but strong, finding the harmony the way they'd done 100 times before. From the audience's perspective, it was perfect. Two legends, one stage, pure magic. But backstage, the crew was watching on a monitor with their hearts in their throats. They could see what the audience couldn't. They could see the way Dean's jaw was swelling slightly. They could see the stiffness in Frank's shoulders. They could see that these two men were performing on top of something broken, and it was taking everything they had to hold it together. The set lasted 45 minutes. They sang 12 songs, traded jokes, did the banter the audience expected. Dean made Frank laugh twice, real laughs that broke through whatever darkness he was carrying. Frank threw his arm around Dean's shoulders during Side by Side, and for a moment it almost looked like everything was fine. But then the song ended and Frank's arm dropped, and the distance came back, invisible to the audience but obvious to anyone who knew them. During the final number, Dean caught Frank's eye across the stage. He gave him a look, just a small nod, a reminder. "You're going to shake my hand." Frank held his gaze for a moment, then nodded back. It was the first real communication they'd had since the punch. When the last note rang out and the applause crashed over them, they turned to each other at center stage. Dean extended his hand. Frank took it. They shook, firm and professional, and the audience went wild, thinking it was part of the act, not knowing they were watching something genuine and fragile and possibly breaking apart even as it happened. They bowed together, waved to the crowd, and walked off stage side by side. The second they were past the curtain, the masks came off. Frank headed straight for his dressing room without a word. Dean stood in the wings for a moment, touching his jaw, then followed. He knocked once, opened the door without waiting for an answer, and went inside. The door closed. For the next 20 minutes, nobody heard anything. No shouting, no crashes, just silence. Wait, because what happened in that room is something only two people know for certain. But the people who were outside, the ones who worked that night and kept their mouths shut for years afterward, they picked up pieces, fragments. One of the lighting guys was standing near the door, and he swore he heard Dean say, "You don't get to do that. Not to me, not to her, not to anyone." Someone else, one of the backup singers, said she heard Frank's voice, quieter than she'd ever heard it, saying something that sounded like an apology, but maybe wasn't. When they came out, Frank left first. He walked past everyone without stopping, got in his car, and drove away. Dean came out 5 minutes later. His jaw was bruising, turning purple along the bone. Someone offered him ice. He waved it off. Someone else asked if he was okay. He said he was fine, and his voice was so flat and empty that nobody asked again. The stage manager approached him carefully. "That was incredible out there. You saved the show." Dean looked at him for a long moment. "The show," he said, like he was tasting the words and finding them bitter. "Yeah, the show." He went back to his dressing room, packed his things, and left. The cleanup crew found his handkerchief in the trash later, still stained with blood. One of them kept it, thought it might be worth something someday, but she never sold it. Said it felt wrong, like selling proof of something private and painful. The story didn't leak immediately. The Stardust crew knew better than to talk. The audience never knew what they'd witnessed. The performance held together by sheer will and professional pride. But in the weeks after, the people who'd been backstage started whispering, carefully, to people they trusted. And slowly the story spread through the Vegas circuit, through the nightclub world, through the inner circles of entertainers and crew who understood what it meant when two legends came that close to destroying everything on one bad night. Dean and Frank didn't speak for months afterward. They sent messages through mutual friends, through managers, through the careful network of people who kept the industry running. When they finally did perform together again, it was different. Still professional, still good, but there was a distance now, a carefulness that hadn't been there before. Like they were two men who'd seen exactly how much damage they could do to each other and decided to never get that close again. Rita, the girl at the center of it, left Vegas a week later. She moved back east, got married, lived a quiet life. Years later, someone tracked her down and asked her what happened that night. She said she didn't remember much, just that Dean Martin had been kind when he didn't have to be, and that sometimes kindness costs more than people realize. The punch itself became a ghost story in the business. Everyone had heard about it. Nobody wanted to talk about it directly. If you asked Dean, he'd change the subject. If you asked Frank, he'd walk away. But the people who were there, they carried it with them. They'd be at a show years later, watching some other performer handle some other crisis, and they'd think about that night, about Dean taking a hit and deciding to save the show anyway, about Frank following him onto that stage when he could have walked away, about the 30 seconds that held everything together just long enough. Stop for a second and think about what it takes to do what Dean did. Not just the performance, though that was impressive enough, but the choice he made in the hallway with his lip bleeding and his friend's fist still clenched and the whole night balanced on a knife edge. He could have hit back. He could have let it fall apart. Instead, he gave Frank a path forward, a way to be professional even in the middle of rage, and he trusted that Frank would take it. That's not showmanship. That's something deeper. The footage of the performance still exists somewhere, transferred from the original broadcast tape to video, then digital. You can find clips online if you know where to look. Watch Dean's face during the first song. Watch the way his smile never quite reaches his eyes. Watch Frank's shoulders, the tension in them. Watch the moment they shake hands at the end. The way Dean's grip is firm, but Frank's lingers just a second too long, like he's trying to say something he can't put into words in front of 1,500 people. The truth is, nobody won that night. Nobody lost either. They both just survived it, and survival is its own kind of victory in a world where everything can collapse in 30 seconds if you let it. If you enjoyed spending this time here, I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing. A simple like also helps more than you'd think. And if you want to know what really happened when Frank came back to Vegas 3 months later, and Dean was already booked at the same venue on the same weekend, leave a comment and maybe we'll talk about that night too.